The Twigg and Jenkins podcast. Look at us, all grown up. We have microphones, we have cameras, and we have the incomparable, the incredible, the brilliant Marina Jenkins.
Hello.
There are going to be no curse words. I made a pact in my head, Twigg.
All right.
Because my wife is here.
What are the consequences should you kind of underperform that pact?
Where's the swear jar?
Where's the swear jar? I don't know. Very good point.
I take cash. You can just give it to me.
We'll just give you cash.
Yeah. Hit you with my Venmo, no problemo.
We are so honored to have Marina Jenkins, Executive Director of the National Democratic Redistricting Committee. But more importantly, if not for Marina Jenkins, Carri, Twigg, and I would never have become friends.
That's true.
It really comes down to Marina Jenkins. But thank you for joining us on our official looking podcast.
So fun. Thank you for having me.
Carri, Twigg, I think you have to do the origin story.
Sure. So Brad and I started sharing an office at the White House, as you know. And as you know, knew well before I did, because y'all were married and had children at that point. I don't know if Oscar was born yet, but
No,
Sadie was definitely born.
Yeah.
And Brad is one of those unique and distinct individuals that thinks you have to talk louder on the phone to be heard. And so we share his office, and it's tiny, and so I'm sitting directly in front of him. And I had all the labor unions, and it was right at the height of like them trying to be very upset about healthcare. So I'm literally being screamed at by labor bros all day long.
Like Trumpka.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brad is on the phone with like Angelina Jolie, talking about the French state dinner. Angie and Brad, are you coming? And screaming into the back of my head with this enthusiasm. And I'm generally speaking kind of suspicious of enthusiasm for whatever reason.
Fair enough.
Let's just don't get too high, don't get too low, just keep a steady middle. And so Brad is screaming about Angelina Jolie in the back of my head, or whoever it was, like all manner of famous person who wanted to come to the White House. Rihanna was a guest of Brad's. And I was just like, this guy is the worst. He's so loud. He's so sort of like uncritically enthusiastic.
It's a lot.
It's so true. And I sensed it because Twigg sat right in front of me. So also, I just see this beautiful head of hair. But throughout the day, she would just like look back.
The side eye.
Yeah. It would just be this look of disdain.
Yeah,
Like you just look back like, what? Who are you? Why do I have to work with you?
Like, I asked to move. I actually, so I'd lasted about a week, and then I went to, I think, Johannes probably. Yeah. And it was just like, I can't work like this. Like, it's untenable. It's not, I need a different office. And he like laughed in my face and was like, ma'am, this is the White House. How dare you? You are so lucky to be here. And another office, go where? Like, it's this big. You think you're sharing an office because there's just all these offices that you can have instead.
And we had actually a cool office compared to most offices.
Actually gorgeous, little corner office.
We had windows. Yeah. It was a whole vibe.
Yeah, it was nice.
And and I was told this. Someone I think told me, they were like, oh yeah, Twigg wants to leave your office. And then my heart dropped because in my head I'm like, I really wanted you to be my friend too. I was like, oh man, Twigg doesn't like me. This is awful. And then I think you met Marina, and then magically,
Marina,
you were nice to me after that.
Your wife and your daughter came to the office, and I started a conversation with Marina, and I was like, Marina's incredible. Like, she's so smart. She's so pretty. Look at how cute their daughter is. Like, she's so well adjusted. And she married Brad. So, like, there must be something redeeming about Brad that I'm not seeing. So let me take a second look. Reverse.
You have to sort of take the loudness with a grain of salt. I cannot imagine when we transitioned to work from home during the pandemic, during lockdown, still to this day, he will be 2 floors below me in our home, and I will have to pause my meeting to yell downstairs, please be quiet.
Yeah.
Please
I'm in the basement.
Lower your voice. He's in the basement, and I'm like, he's interrupting my Zoom
loud.
2 floors above.
Do you not hear it?
In my head, I'm not being that loud.
Sure.
In my head, I'm just being enthusiastic. You know, I want to let people
He's
on
projecting.
the other line know how excited I am.
Yeah. So
And the way
shout
that
at them.
the way that I communicate that is to yell into the phone very loudly. So yeah, God bless you, Marina. So look, it's full circle. So now you're our first official guest Ryan was our first official guest, but we weren't in like a podcast studio.
We didn't have mics.
We didn't have microphones.
It's much more professional now.
We had a bottle of wine is what we had. We didn't have microphones.
Yeah, it was a little loose.
It was very loose.
A little loose.
It was very loose. But our first official guest, this is good because
Classing it up for Marina.
we're classing it up, and also Marina's a classy lady, and
Sophisticated and really intelligent.
I was
highly
just gonna
credentialed.
say, highly credentialed, super smart.
I have a BA from Ohio State, so we'll see how I hang.
Look, I'm a state university bro as well.
The Ohio State
The Ohio State.
Land Grant College, back when they had to let me in. You know what I mean? Because I lived within 30 miles of the campus.
Look, UVA guy over here. We're just up here repping state universities. Marina, otherwise, Princeton, Stanford. Oof. It's
Lame.
like so lame.
So lame.
So lame. But Twigg, I feel like you should start with the questions because I'm just going to ask Marina ridiculous questions. And so I can maybe pepper in some thoughts. But I feel like I know so much about what you're doing through osmosis.
Yeah.
But I'm curious what Twigg wants to know about what's going down.
I actually don't know how your work transitions between cycles. So it's like I get what it is in the reapportionment years and the district drawing line sense, but like in a year, like an election year. So I think you should tell everyone what you do.
Yeah.
And then also specifically in election years, how it morphs, changes, or doesn't.
Sure.
Yeah.
So yes, absolutely. So I am the executive director of the National Democratic Redistricting Committee and its affiliated organizations, which includes the National Redistricting Foundation, which is our 501c3, and the National Redistricting Action Fund, which is our 501c4, and has the campaign All on the Line, which is our grassroots advocacy campaign, and that is the legacy organization of Obama for America, Organizing for America.
Oh, actually, I didn't know that.
They took it over.
That's because it's President Obama's political legacy organization is the redistricting work, and
which is crazy to think about. Like Marina's the ED of the former OFA, like that
wild.
list that.
Yeah, all
social,
of those assets.
like all that shit is now all on the line, which is crazy.
Yeah.
So we have one shit out of you. Are we counting that? So close.
Venmo.
So close.
Venmo.
I should just Venmo your dad. We should have like a little Venmo for your dad, so like other people could just Venmo him as
bizarre,
well.
Yeah. So the organization was created in 2017. President Obama famously referred to the redistricting in 2011 that happened. We may remember as a shellacking. That the Republican machine was so organized. They had a project called Project Red Map, which was basically to win all these state legislative races so that they could be in control of map drawing when it happened. And because of that, Republicans gained so many state control in states across the country from a state legislative perspective and in governor's offices. And the gerrymandering that they did in 2011 ahead of the 2012 midterms was incredibly aggressive and incredibly effective. And President Obama felt that intensely, as you already referred to, healthcare, but trying to achieve anything legislatively during his presidency was so much harder because you had members of Congress from these incredibly gerrymandered districts where not only is it on a whole, the Congress is not actually reflective of what the people of the country and what people want in terms of policy, but that you have these gerrymandered districts that are sending people who are very extreme, where these districts are drawn so that the only election that matters is the primary and not the general, right? And so you have these really extreme forces on both sides, in fairness, because that's what the gerrymander map does,
but their side is just crazy.
Right. No, I understand, but like what it creates is it creates extremes in it, and it creates obstruction in Congress because people are not able to, bipartisan was a bad word, right? Like it was for someone to reach across the aisle. There was a period of time where, particularly on the right, you couldn't do that or you would lose office. And I think that's still true to some degree. So the organization was founded 2016, 2017, started to staff up. And it wasn't totally clear, to get back to your question, whether this is an organization that would sort of pop up and be around for the redistricting cycle, or if this is a long-term infrastructure. And so that was kind of an open question when the organization was created. We found incredible success over the redistricting cycle in 2021 and 2022. The New York Times called it the fairest congressional map in 40 years. We were just incredibly successful. And so what we've done in the past couple of years is transition from that sort of short-term thinking to, okay, this is part of the infrastructure for the Democratic Party, for the progressive community, that this is work that needs to be done. And also, these redistricting cases and map drawing happens throughout the decade. We're sort of past this point of this is an every 10-year thing. Yeah. These fights are continuous. There were still maps being drawn this year. There's litigation that continues. We saw a fight in Louisiana this year, a new map in Alabama last year due to litigation. There's going to be a redraw in Ohio next year. This is work that's just continuing. So keeping people informed about redistricting, filing lawsuits, getting people engaged to go and participate in their process, winning the elections that matter at the state level to make sure that when the map drawing happens, that we have the right people in place to actually support a fair and democratic process, a lower, small d democratic process. That's our mission, and that continues through the mid-decade cycle, which is where we are right now.
Yeah, this is so funny because I cut my teeth in Ohio, and remember all of the sort of the Democratic Party work machinations around what in Ohio, I don't know if it works like this in every state, but there's an apportionment board that consists of the governor, the secretary of state, and the auditor, as well as representatives from the House, the state House, and the state Senate, that then have to together draw a map and then get it approved by the Supreme Court. I don't know if that's how it still works. It could have evolved. I've left Ohio and things changed. We haven't won a statewide Democratic race since. Anyway, that's not true, Sherrod Brown. But it's interesting to me that you're talking about this as something to sort of buttress the Democratic institutional establishment, because that was sort of, or at least the claim at the time when OFA started, was that OFA fundamentally undermined the Democratic institution, like the institutions of the Democratic Party, because it was this outside entity that was siphoning. It's fascinating now to see that it's like folded in and fully focused on this broader long-term strategy that Democrats are not good at typically.
Yeah. It's so true, and I think the answer or the moral of the story is we have to do both, right? And as a party, we have to focus on grassroots activism, and we have to ensure that people are educated and that the state-based organizations are equipped. And also, we have to work within the Beltway and ensure that all of the relevant stakeholders are also fully informed and bought in on the work that needs to happen in the state. And so we really view ourselves as living in between those worlds. And so part of, I always say to our team, like, we live in the tension. Like, we live in the space in between where we have to be communicating with all those people. So we are a national organization that does work in the states. Right. And we, A.G. Holder always says, Chairman, former Attorney General A.G. Holder, Eric Holder, always says, if there's anything that he wants from us, it's that we get an A+ and plays well with others, and that's incredibly important in the states with the community We're a relatively small staff. We're not going to replace any of the work, that grassroots advocacy work that's happening in the states. We're there to provide resources, to support, to help organize, but we're not trying to replace that work.
The challenge, though, speaking of playing nice, I think that's such a smart way to put it, because as Twigg was mentioning, and for those who are listening and have effing clue, and I didn't see me.
Look at you.
So much better.
Growth.
So much better. I'm evolving right on camera. They have no clue on what any of this means. Essentially, gerrymandering is people in power draw the maps to remain in power.
That's right.
So they're like, if I'm a congressperson and I was elected, I want to make sure that I never get voted out. So I choose the voters. Yeah. And in a lot of ways, Democrats and Republicans over decades and decades, there would be deal making. Like, you can get this district if I can get this district. And Republicans just did a better job of it.
Yeah.
And your organization now is saying, no, this is fundamentally wrong. And what it's doing is resting the power in the hands of those that already have it. And what we have to do is make sure that all these maps are fair.
Right.
Can I make one small correction
before
you move on to your next point? Because I think it's really important that we draw a distinction between individuals and their corrupt behavior and sort of the mechanics of the party, right? Like the party is interested in winning as many seats as possible. It's not about an individual congressperson.
100%.
Right? They don't care whether or not it's Joey or Jimmy that's in that seat necessarily, so long as they're getting it's a seat that will ladder up to a majority in the House and in the Senate. Well, the Senate doesn't district, obviously. But so it's not like gerrymandering is a political process that is very seldomly controlled by like one person being like, I want to stay in power, so I'm going to draw this district for myself. It's this broad patchwork on the state level that ladders up to the national level that's about overall national majorities around both in states and like overcoming a Democratic bonus or bias in a state by redistricting it so that you can actually have Democratic states where all the members of Congress are Republicans in a way that makes no sense and is not reflective of that. But it's not on an individual thing. It's like a broader
Such a great point. Yes.
Party thing. Because I think we talk about like every elected official is corrupt. And it's like, that's not true.
No.
Like they have way less power to even be corrupt. Like maybe someone got a new roof in the Cleveland City Council. But it's like the kind of corruptness, that corruptedness that we see is not often what people imagine.
I mean, at the end of the day, our job is what Carri is describing. Our job is to ladder up to, and not specifically a particular outcome.
Yeah.
Our mission is to ladder up to a system that is competitive, that allows the will of the voters to be realized and then translated into policy and practice, right? And so if we have fair maps, we feel confident that Democrats and progressives will do just fine, because actually on so many issues that the American public care about, there is broad consensus. There is consensus on common sense gun safety laws. There is consensus on reproductive rights. Like, you wouldn't know that by looking at what's coming out of our Congress or out of state legislatures. But actually, if you have fair districts in place, those policies and those elected officials will be successful, because that's actually where the American people are.
Right.
And that's the whole point, is trying to create a democratic, small d democratic system that is true to the ideals and the promises of our founding documents, right? That we have this, we have this system that respects the will of the voter. And I think so much of what we're seeing now beyond redistricting, I think there's this broader movement on the right to minimize, diminish, outright squash the will of the voter, and to create systems that allow people either who are in power to stay in power, notwithstanding what the voters want to say, or to put people in power so that they can just have their will as opposed to the voters' will.
I remember and this goes to sort of what you were saying too, Brad, both of what you guys were saying, and a question from Marina is, like, I remember going through this redistricting process so going through this redistricting process in Ohio, and one of the major complaints, particularly from elected officials or people who were hoping to one day be congresspeople from the left, from the Democratic Party, was often that if you made districts more competitive, it was like this constant tension between compactness and competitiveness when you have like the crazy looking thing. But also that if you made districts less competitive, the number of Black people, of women, of LGBTQ, of Asian representatives would go down.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a big pushback. I remember being like, we actually don't want you to do this, because that you're gonna tank the number of members of the CBC or the or Latino electeds or whatever. Is that still present? And is that tension still present? And that, or have we seen that actually bear out?
That is sometimes a real tension and sometimes a boogeyman. So that the benefit and the value add of our organization, we have an incredibly sophisticated mapping infrastructure. We have geospatial analytics team
Ooh.
and
so it's not like
department.
AAA roadmaps.
Right. No,
like...
we I mean, the mapping technology now is incredibly sophisticated. The data that we have is incredibly sophisticated, right? This is all, it's not new, but it's, as with all things data across, in the United States right now and in the world, changing every day. AI is starting to play a role, right? Like, and we are, we definitely prioritize being on the tip of the spear of that technological skills. And what you're able to do, and the way that we look at redistricting, and the reason that it is important for an entire organization to exist just to do this work, versus having it be run out of the D-Trip or some other party operation, is because we have the political input, we have the organizing, the advocacy, the sort of on the ground understanding of states and communities, and we have the mapping expertise, and we're able to put all of those pieces together to ensure that we can have all of those things, that you can have competitive districts without, not at the expense of districts for communities of color. And Alabama is a great example of this, where recently, we won a case, and
no big deal
at the U.S. Supreme Court, called Allen v. Milligan last year. And one of the only good things the Supreme Court has done in recent history, and I'm not trying to prop them up, because what they did was execute and decide a case on the law as it existed, and not overturn decades of precedent, which they've done in every other instance.
I was just going to say that's like their MO. So,
right.
Yeah.
So it was a relief in that regard. But it was a huge win, and it was incredibly important because we were able to get a second district in Alabama that is a majority black district in compliance with the Voting Rights Act. And you have now 2 districts in Alabama where black voters have the opportunity to elect a candidate of their choice, where they have enough black voters in those districts to sway the election. It is not a guaranteed win. They have to turn out. They have to vote. But it is enough so that that community is able to get to have their voices heard.
Yeah.
And one of the big fights throughout the litigation was, oh, well, in order to draw that district, you're going to be cutting up these other communities. And, there are all these arguments about where the black belt is and what counts as a black belt county in Alabama, and how do you, right? So, but the expertise and the value that we bring is being able to say, no, there are districts that you can draw where you can have all of it. You can have all of the things, and we can have that representation, and it's not an either or. And so I think before we were able to bring that expertise to the table, it was very easy for people who didn't want to see those changes to be able to point to, well, you can't do this because it's going to undermine all these other values that you say that you are for representation.
But now your geospatial launch team has
we're like both and, both and, we can do it all.
Am I allowed to ask you about your opinion on Supreme Court reform?
Yes, you are.
Tell us everything.
I am pro. No, I think what President Biden recently did was great. A.G. Holder has been advocating for Supreme Court reform for a long time. He wrote about it in his book. Our unfinished march. Yeah, go buy A.G. Holder's book. And it's necessary. It's just that what the Supreme Court has been doing over the past several years, and honestly, it's been over a decade, right? You think about the Shelby County decision in 2013, where Chief Justice Roberts was like, no, racism is over. We're fine. We don't need these protections anymore. And I always love, Justice Ginsburg's retort in her dissent of that decision, which is, this is taking your umbrella away in a rainstorm because you're not getting wet. Like, suddenly you look around and you're like, oh, things are fair. We're fine now. We don't need these protections for voters of color. And the reason that things are better is because we have those in place. Yeah. And so, I think this idea that the Supreme Court has been sort of chasing, and it's, the court's obviously only gotten worse since 2013, but it's not new, right? They are just trying to strip away rights and protections left and right, on democracy, on reproductive rights. Obviously, the Dobbs decision was horrendous. This year, the Chevron decision where they sort of just decided that we don't need experts. We can decide. The federal judiciary is the expert. They're so out of touch with the American public. And I think the way and the system that President Biden has proposed and that A.G. Holder has been promoting, where you can have a new seat filled every other year. So you guarantee basically 2 seats per president. And then you get, folks on the court who are, not going to be as corrupt because there is, some connection to the will of the voter about, what the court looks like. And it's just, it's an absurdity at this point. I mean, the court has just lost so much legitimacy. And I say this as someone who, I went to law school and I have revered the Supreme Court. I mean, I believe in the law as a means to good ends. And I think it's disheartening. It's heartbreaking to a certain degree to see what they've done with the court.
I don't think you would know this about me, but I wanted to be a Supreme Court justice when I was little. Like when I was like 8 or 9, I was like, I want to be a Supreme Court justice. And then I shadowed a juvenile court justice at 13 or like whatever age you do your first like shadowing. And I was so emotionally devastated by the experience and like found the idea that we were putting children in jails or in detention centers. And I was just like, don't do it. And she was like, I don't have a choice. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, you get to decide. Like, I had such a naive understanding of, like, you get to decide what the law is. Like, let them go home. Who cares? I don't care. No one should care that a child stole something. They should just be able to have it anyway. We have so much stuff, Oh,
gosh.
And I was so, like, emotionally wrecked. I was like, I'll never be a judge. Like, they don't have the power that I thought they had. Yeah. Executive branch, baby. Wow. And I was like, I want to work at the White House.
Yeah. I love how you just like made those decisions and just like made it happen.
Child. It's so weird.
Whereas my life has just been like, I've just like tripped over myself and gotten opportunity. Like I was never like, I want to do the thing,
That's just good, though.
Chased his passion.
I just chased
very loudly.
Marina Jenkins around and everything worked out.
It's working out great.
I have a question for you, Marina Jenkins.
All right.
Because I feel like for our listeners, our viewers, a lot of this stuff probably feels pretty complex.
Sure.
But I loved how well you broke it down. Relating it back to the sort of gamification of the moment, which is the campaign, right? And the way that we talk about democracy, because that's your job. Your job is protecting democracy, making it more fair for every single person. I'm curious what you think about the shift from the campaign from Donald Trump's going to end democracy to Donald Trump is super weird.
Sure.
And it seems like the weird is working.
Right.
And I'm not saying that Donald Trump is ending democracy. Well, maybe I'll stop there. Is that a good argument? Is Donald Trump ending democracy? What does that mean fundamentally for people listening? And do you actually think that that's true? Do you think that Donald Trump being elected is a existential threat to democracy?
Yes. Yes. Both things are true. The MAGA right, they are seeking authoritarianism and they are super weird. So both things are true.
We could fit both things on the bumper sticker.
Both and. It's very interesting. I think, seeing Governor Walz sort of light this fire of like, these guys are just weird, and sort of the narrative shift there was very interesting. And I think it has been effective. And part of the reason it has been effective is because, the idea of saying to someone, the democracy will end, our democracy will end if you elect Donald Trump. It alienates voters because it feels hyperbolic.
Yeah.
But it also is true. And so I do think we need to figure out the right way to weave these arguments together. I mean, the Project 2025,
that caught on.
That caught on.
Sort of out of nowhere, that seemed to be in the mix and like getting TikTok.
It's all John Oliver. Let's just thank John Oliver.
Love John Oliver.
It's great. There are some really great breakdowns and messaging. The other thing is they were stupid about Project 2025 was they made a website. Like they laid it all out for people.
They
do that always.
I guess they
do that always.
Yeah.
Like that's what Alec was on the state. Like they've been doing that forever. They'd be like, no, go to the use the drop down window, and you'll see all the draconian things we're pushing everywhere in the country. Like they've always done that.
Absolutely, and I don't think Trump has made it a secret that he has authoritarian fascist desires. Whether he would use those words to describe himself or not, that is what he is describing. And again, it goes back to, this idea of, are we going to have a system in place, whether that's, thinking about redistricting and working against gerrymandering, or we're talking about fighting voter suppression, are we going to have a system that respects and reflects the will of the voter? Are we going to have a truly democratic system or not? Yeah. And it's almost that simple. And I think that at the end of the day, former President Trump and the Project 2025 folks and, the extreme right have made it very clear that they are not interested in the will of the people. They are interested in the will of their people.
Sure.
And so we have to be able to engage with both. We have to be able to talk to folks in a way that isn't scary, but that also says your vote is incredibly powerful. That's why they're trying to take it away.
Yeah.
And you have to exercise that power in order to keep it. And so, we often say we have to do democracy. Democracy is a verb. And so if we can, engage
like
and mobilize our folks, it does sound like a John Mayer song. Well,
deep cut. John Mayer cut.
Okay.
Well, I think one of the things you're pointing out, but we see it over and over again, not just with Trump and democracy, but like human beings, somebody else said this, I did not come up with this, is like we're really bad at thinking about things that are too big or things that are too small. And I think whether it is the climate crisis, whether it's even pre-Dobbs decision, the idea that abortion rates could be taken away, whether like we see over and over again, people are not willing to engage with the worst case scenario, even though that has happened over and over again, particularly as it relates to Trump or the climate or what have you.
Sure.
And it's just not something that human beings can sustain. I think it's probably kind of antithetical to how we are able to, like our evolution, like our deep evolution.
And it's survival.
Is like,
it's survival. It's like you got to focus on what's in front of you.
You know what I mean? You got to you got to go over that hill. You got to go over that ridge. You got to find water. You got to find food. Like we're not able to be like, there's something really terrifying off in the distance and let me work myself back from that. Like we're not great at that.
We're also bad at staying focused. I think that, for instance, reproductive freedom is a perfect example where in the lead up to the decision, and I think even to your point, Twigg brings up a very good point. This came up all the time, right?
Constantly,
and it came up during the last time Trump ran and won.
Constantly.
The rhetoric was like, this guy's going to do this. This is the top of his agenda is to roll back Roe v. Wade. And every single person you talk to about this would be like, yeah, right. It's never going to happen. It's never going to happen.
I was like, why not?
Some communities.
Well, yes. No, you're right. You're right. Some communities very much were like, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But I think the vast majority of the American public, as evidenced by the fact that Trump won white female voters that cycle. You know what I mean? Like, people just did not believe it.
Yeah.
And even after the fact, it's on a website. Here's how we're going to strip away. Yeah. Here's how the president, after President Trump is reelected, hypothetically, how he will have the most power that a president has ever had.
Right.
And he will be able to do whatever the fuck he wants to do. Oh, man. Damn it.
Saw that coming.
But people still don't believe it. People still don't believe it.
No,
I don't know what, that's the question with the weird thing, which is, I like the idea of we can do both because I think we need to do both. I think that we need to not be afraid of him because just being afraid of him doesn't work.
Yeah.
Because of this fact. Like Twigg and I were talking about how, when Donald Trump came on the scene and he's firing off all these crazy texts and he's coming down the elevator and he's saying wild shit, we just got used to it. Right. The American public just got desensitized to that. Yeah. And I think that happens on a policy level too. People just get desensitized to it. They're like, oh, okay, this is just the way things are now. And we can't let that happen again.
Well, it's also that he operates in such extremes that people, it feels hyperbolic, but it's like when people show you who they are, believe them, right?
Yeah,
like, but because he seems so extreme, and sometimes he says crazy things.
Yeah.
So then you're like, well, he didn't mean that, so maybe he didn't mean the other thing. But it's like, no, but he really means that. And the Project 2025, I think, is the first time that there is a lot of attention being paid to, here's their plan.
Yeah.
Here's their game plan. And as you're saying, Carri, it's deconstruct everything. You know, it's remove all executive power that lives in the administrative state, right? So Department of Justice, Department of Commerce, you know, the census, that's in particular for us, you know, a very important element of the federal infrastructure is the U.S. Census and how important that is to so many other decisions throughout each decade. And, you know, I mean, you go through and it's all of these, every agency, you know, what they just did with the Chevron decision, which I think, again, people, it feels wonky. So the decision... The decision, so Chevron was this case from the 80s, basically saying that where there are questions about federal policy and the federal statutes are ambiguous or they're not totally clear on a particular question, that the federal courts should defer to the experts at the federal agency who are actually, you know, implementing those policies to say what the law means. And so it's the deference to or listening to experts in that field. So for the EPA, what does the EPA think that this statute about water mean? Because they will know better than a federal judge who maybe was in private practice, working in corporate litigation for 30 years and knows nothing about, you know, chemicals in water, water rights. And so this has been our status quo for decades, and the court decided this has been on their chopping block for a long time. They've been working up to it, and finally they said, no, you don't have to listen to the experts. Judges know best, and we just get to decide. It was an incredible power grab. And so just, again, it's all of the things that actually impact your life, whether you're going to have clean air, whether you're going to have clean water in your community. All of these things, we're now no longer going to listen to the people who have PhDs in that area and have been studying and spending their whole life thinking about that and analyzing that. They're going to be instead, it's going to be up to a partisan appointed judge.
Great. So we have that going for us.
Yeah.
PhDs have really been ruined though because of Raygun. I just want to say, like, every PhD now is on notice. We just can't use that term anymore.
Raygun.
You know?
Poor Raygun.
Poor Raygun.
I actually don't feel bad for her.
You don't feel bad for her and her PhD? No, we shouldn't. I'm just saying we should be careful with that term. Sorry, Twigg, I'm interrupting.
I do think I think anyone who gets humiliated on that scale, I do feel bad for her.
I feel bad.
Whether they self-selected into it or not. You know, someone or her entire community failed them.
Someone failed them.
That's true.
Because they were not appropriately calibrated to the moment.
True.
And we rely on other people around us to help calibrate us.
Raygun didn't have an 11-year-old daughter who could just tell you,
like, that's...
You're really bad, Dad. Don't do that. Which is what my daughter does every single day. Like, Dad, don't wear that hat. You're trying too hard. Just don't do it. You know, like, that's what Raygun needed.
Maybe.
You know?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Do you guys do much election protection stuff, and are you concerned about it?
Very concerned. We work really closely with an organization called Power the Polls to do poll worker recruitment. So poll workers are incredibly important. And particularly in this environment, it is so heated, and there is a poll worker shortage across the country because election officials, these are volunteers. They're just people in their community wanting to go and
you get
make
like $100. Or at least you did in New York.
You get a little bit of money. Yeah.
I was a poll worker in Brooklyn for a couple times.
Yeah, it's perhaps different depending on the jurisdiction. No, I'm but it's not. These are not professional election workers.
No.
This is not someone who has been elected, appointed. This is not their job.
Yeah.
Maybe they get a stipend for the day, but the threats to poll workers, the incredible intensity around that role, and particularly, aggressive folks on the right, making it feel dangerous and making it feel scary to do like a civic duty.
Yeah.
And to ensure that we have elections that are, just safe and operate smoothly. It's logistics, right? It's like making sure you have enough of the ballots printed out, making sure you have all the stickers, making sure, the line is orderly and that the machines are working. And if not, who's calling, to get it fixed. And it's just a very sort of basic community oriented, exercise, but now it feels like it has this heightened intensity around it because of the election denialism that we're seeing from the far right, and just this sort of aggressive, and it's like, is there going to be violence? Is there going to be what's going to happen at the election site?
Certification stuff,
right? Exactly. So for us, that's our volunteers are. They love it. We do a lot. We send a lot of our volunteers, a lot of our grassroots folks to be poll workers, and Power the Polls is an awesome organization for that. But it's going to be. I mean, I don't think there is any question about whether we're going to see a more heightened version of what we saw in 2020 in this election cycle, and I think there will be a lot more of that. There's going to be, what we saw in Georgia last week with, Trump specifically called out by name 3 members of the Georgia Board of Elections and said they were doing great work, that they were pit bulls. And then later that week, they adopted a rule where they're giving themselves the power of inquiry to have that they have to basically review the election results before, with some made up standard before it gets certified. And I think we're going to see that in other places. And again, the electoral work that NDRC does is based in the states. And again, it's this state offices are so important for how our democracy functions. And I think it's going to be an intense time, but I think we have a good legal infrastructure.
Do we have enough infrastructure dedicated to kind of protecting the stuff or fighting back on the ways that they are pouring billions of dollars into?
I think so. It's I think the legal infrastructure on the left is very strong, and there are in 2020, the Trump operation filed dozens and dozens of lawsuits. We were there and fought them all back. They are going to be better this time, as with everything. They're going to be more prepared and have better people and smarter people, perhaps, than they did the first time around. Yeah. But and these fights have been ongoing. So I think it's already, the preparations are being made, but it's also the fights are already happening. So a lot of it is going to be stuff we're seeing, now between now and November 5th. And I think we're in a strong position to fight it in court again, though and this is again why, the judiciary is so important, but also was such a focus for Trump when he was in office, is that, having these questions answered by federal courts and ultimately having this kind of question go in front of the U.S. Supreme Court, which has become the biggest rubber stamp for Donald Trump, is pretty nerve-wracking. So, which is why, mobilization, GOTV is so important, because if we can make it definitive, then we're not going to be in that.
I was just going to say, this is why we have to win big.
Yeah.
I think Wall said this at his rally, which was great. There can't be any, there will be, we know the margins are going to be thin, but winning big is going to be almost just as important as winning.
Yeah.
Because if we're winning by a point and it's left up to the courts,
right?
I mean, the one thing Donald Trump did do was remake the judiciary. Yeah. I think Biden, in defense of President Biden did a great job
with the courts.
Really great job on the courts. When I was at the White House, that was one of my portfolios under President Obama. We did not do as good of a job in our first term. Like, we were so focused on legislation. We're so focused on Lady Gaga that we took our eye off of the judiciary. But Biden was so good on the courts.
Focused,
but it all ladders up to the Supreme Court, and you just can't trust them. Yeah. So we have to win big. So
there's no reason for us not to win big. I mean, we have all the numbers, and we have all the numbers in every single state. It's about whether or not those people will vote. Yeah. And it's not like those votes go to Donald Trump. It's really between like Kamala Harris and just like non-participation.
Right.
But there's no reason why she shouldn't have a landslide victory.
There's no reason why she should lose. I do want to let you cook on Kamala, though.
Yeah.
How are you?
I love it.
Coconuts.
I love it.
Brats.
Yeah, Brat Summer. Kamala is Brat.
Kamala's Brat?
Kamala is Brat.
Tell me how you feel.
I'm excited. It's been such an emotional roller coaster of a summer, but I'm riding the wave. I love what we've seen over the past several weeks. I think the choice of Governor Walz as a running mate is incredibly was a really, really great choice. He's been so great. I think the way that they relate with each other is really impactful, and I think you just feel it. There's so much energy. There's so much enthusiasm, and it's exciting, and there's like energy in it, and
totally.
People are re-engaged that didn't feel like they were super engaged, and there's optimism and there's hope, and I think it's interesting, like talking about using the word weird, but even in the positive, what they talk about, just using the word joy, like using the word, like thinking about the opportunity and being optimistic is, I think, so powerful. And I think Hillary Clinton tried to do that in 2016, but didn't like hit it quite right. And I think, so much of politics is about timing. And I just feel like this moment, Kamala Harris was made for this moment. Yeah. Tim Walz is made for this moment. Like it is just, everything is coalescing. Everything is vibing. This is what people are saying about like her rally in Atlanta right after it was announced. It was just like, the vibes are immaculate. Like, just like, this is like, the vibes are immaculate. And that's how I feel. And it's you can just feel it, and it's online. It's, it's on TikTok. It's on Instagram.
Podcast title,
it's on
by the
podcasts.
way. Podcast title for this episode. The vibes are immaculate.
The vibes are immaculate. All right, one last question. I don't even know how much more time we have, but because I feel like, Marina and I often get in debates. Because Marina, I'm much more to the left of my brilliant, beautiful wife. Not much more, but I like to shake it up sometimes. Yeah. I've got some Bernie bro. I got a Bernie bro past. I'm curious. You were showing me the tickety talks.
I do.
The TikToks.
Yeah.
You were showing me the tickety talks about. There seems to be an interesting battle taking place on TikTok between, I would say, leftists who are upset about the war, very upset about the war, and who have been very vocal about what a Harris-Walz ticket looks like, and that encouraging their followers not to vote.
Sure.
And the backlash is immaculate, because the backlash is coming from the Black community. Like, you were showing me just these really beautiful, just like break down how that view is misguided. But from the seat that you occupy, which is different, which is to say, it's easy to lob stones at the Democratic Party. I do it all the time. It's like my favorite thing in the world.
Yeah, confirmed.
Both in public and private.
Yes. Exactly.
Yes.
But what you just went through with Twigg and I, like, how much work state party leaders are doing, organizers are doing, right? Like how much work there is to protect the little that we have, not to mention to like work towards progress. There's so much work that's happening.
Yeah.
And anyway, I would love to let you cook on just, you know, why elections matter, and why it might be easy to throw stones on the tickety-tocks,
right,
without realizing how much hard work is put into this stuff each and every day.
Yeah. I often have to remind Brad when he goes on his rants that I am employed by the Democratic Party. And I am an establishment Democrat. We are not all evil. No, I think it's important, you know, and you were talking about, you know, just being young and how you think about ways that you were going to engage and, you know, what kind of system you wanted to be in to make change. And I am a person, I was like this before I went to law school, but I am a lawyer, and I believe in systems, and I believe that systems and structure and engaging with the existing systems and structures are a way to make change. Some people don't believe that, and they want to burn it all down, and that's okay. And that's where oftentimes Brad and I will disagree on things.
I mean, some people believe in systems, but believe that the only way we make systems better is by holding those systems accountable.
And everybody has a role to play.
And everyone has a role to play.
Everybody has a role to play, right.
And we love both. We love both sides.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. See, look at this communication that we have.
But, you know, but at the end of the day, you know, and I think that Vice President Harris has engaged with this, even in the rallies, the past rallies that she did over the past week. And you can see even movement that she made in response to the protests that were happening at the rallies. And, you know, the moral of the story for me is that I do believe that we need to make that incremental change within a system. And I think that she is trying to make that case. And she said recently, you know, I think there was a rally in Michigan where there were protesters and they interrupted her speech, and she kind of stopped for a minute but then kind of pushed through. And then the next, I can't remember if it was in
the Twigg and Jenkins podcast covered this. Nevada. I'm not sure if you're a subscriber.
Yes.
We were a little too hot though.
We were so hot. We were upset. Yeah, we were upset about that.
I was upset, and but there was this whole. Speaking of TikTok, there's a whole like, guys, for the first like 30 seconds of that clip is actually her being like, I hear you. I absolutely hear you. But the thing that I was reacting to was the very last thing.
Well, the last thing that got clipped out was
Classico.
On all the cable news. It was on all the Twitters, all the tickety-talks.
Which again, we're sophisticated enough to know that that's exactly how that's going to happen. And so it's like the thing you say before, everything happens in clips.
That's
so you're not going to get the context that perhaps you deserve or that you want. And preparing yourself for that reality.
The good thing, though, I'm sure is because of our podcast, because the next time that happened,
absolutely,
she was so much better.
Well, she actually engaged.
Yeah.
And she turned and she stopped her speech and she said, I'm working on this.
Yep.
President Biden and I are working on this around the clock.
Yep.
It's not going to happen today. We are working for a permanent ceasefire.
Yes.
Please let me finish my speech.
But then, you noticed...
Right, and
the
then
crowd all cheered. The
worked.
Crowd all cheered, and so the protesters are validated.
Yeah,
their views are heard.
Yeah,
we're all on the same page.
Right.
Whereas the last go around was kind of like, do you want Donald Trump to win? It's like, well, bro,
well,
that's
but
not,
again, both of those things are true, right?
Both of those things are true.
It is important for her to make sure that wing of the party.
Yeah.
We are the big tent party. It is important for her to ensure that those people are heard and that they feel heard, and that their point of view is being validated.
Right.
Even if it's not overnight going to result in a change in our ability to convince Bibi Netanyahu to do something different than what he's doing.
Yeah.
But it's also important for people to understand that this is a binary choice in front of us.
Yeah.
And I think what I was showing you online that was just really compelling to me was, you know, there was a creator, it was a black gay creator who was, you know, just talking about, you know, he's like, I'm a leftist. I am so angry about this war every day, but also I am the person whose rights are going to be taken away first. I am the person who's going to be, who is most vulnerable in this situation.
Right.
And, you know, you can, I'm not saying more people are more vulnerable than others, you know, but there are communities where, yes, those communities are going to be at risk if, and it's all relative, right? It's not, there's no silver bullet. There's no candidate that's going to win and become president and everything's going to be saved and everything's going to be better. We have a system where you have to make a choice.
Anywhere in the world, though.
Right.
Like nowhere in the world
right.
is it possible to have one elected official that creates a panacea of like optimism, hope, and utopian social values. It's just not part of the human capability set.
It's a good segue to Down-ballot. So, which was so interesting because actually Twigg and I were talking about this before it was Kamala. And I think it was also any conversation you had in town, the focus was, well, we don't want to talk about the presidency because it's boring and it's a rehash of last go around. And maybe Biden is not going to be the inspirational figure. Let's focus on the down ballot. Let's focus on these young, inspiring folks who are running for elected office. You guys just rolled out all of your local endorsements. Is that right? State and local endorsements.
We have more endorsements coming. But yes, so electorally, our focus is on state races. So state legislatures, governors, state Supreme Courts. So we are in the midst of a multi-wave endorsement process. So we just put our second wave of endorsements out for Pennsylvania and Georgia state legislative races. We have endorsed state Supreme Court justice candidates and incumbents in North Carolina and in Michigan and in Ohio.
I was going to ask if it's like a sports analogy, right? Twigg and I have been watching Hard Knocks, right? Like, if you're scouting for people that don't know, like who's a good example of someone who's running for state Supreme Court or running for state legislature? We were like, this person is awesome. Please donate to them. Or I don't know. Are you allowed to say that? What is it? Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah. No, I mean, we have an incredible, so our endorsement program is called the Democracy Defenders Program because these are people who are going to defend our democracy. And again, this is where we get into this, like, are we, being hyperbolic? And I believe the answer is no, that this is real, but it's not superstars. Yeah. I mean, they are all superstars, but it's not like this one person in the Pennsylvania State House is going to save everything. We need that person in the House because they're going to make the right decisions and support voters when it comes to questions of democracy. And then we need their neighboring district and we need the next district. And we need to have majorities in chambers across the country. And so it is this really piecemeal push. And state Supreme Courts, talking about the U.S. Supreme Court, they have abandoned any sense of protecting voters. They have abandoned any sense of being the place for, people to vindicate their rights, whether
Should
those
judges
are
be elected?
Reproductive rights. I mean, it's a good question. I mean, it's...
Do you have an opinion? Okay.
I do.
Sure.
You just don't want to offend all of the judges that you're working with?
Well, no, I mean, but again, it's like this is the system that we have, and so right now, it's I am a realist, I am a pragmatist. Like, this is our system. We got to play in our system to change it, and so that's I think for us trying to win these elections, and in a lot of places, actually, you don't have elected justices on state Supreme Courts, and it's not better. Like Arizona and Texas. In Arizona, you have what are called retention elections. So, like, the justice is there, and then you're like, should this person stay in office? Yes or no? Got it. And it's incredibly hard to win on a no vote. Like, nobody has really tried to do it. So you end up having, these justices who are subject to election, but it's not real, and it ends up people just sort of stay there forever. So it's not just like a straightforward yes or no. It's just
like
also,
most things in democracy.
Yeah, it's not clean, and every state is different. It's a patchwork. But the state offices are so important, and honestly, there's so much attention that's paid to federal races, to the presidential certainly, but frankly, state legislators and governors and state Supreme Courts actually have arguably a bigger impact on people's day-to-day lives in terms of infrastructure, roads, access to medical health services,
reproductive
freedom, all of those things, whether your governor's going to accept Medicaid subsidies from the federal government, right? All of those questions are actually decided by your state officers. And so those state races are so, so, so important.
How can people find you? Where do people go to look at these endorsements?
You can look at the endorsements on our website, which is democraticredistricting.com. Just rolls off the tongue.
So easy to say.
And for folks interested in getting engaged in our grassroots advocacy work or becoming a poll worker, you can go to allontheline.org. So named because, and this is why I got involved in redistricting, basically every other issue, any issue that you care about, the maps are foundational to how policies on those issues are going to be made. And so it's all on the line. So go to allontheline.org.
It's a twofer.
Yeah.
It's a twofer of a name.
Yeah.
Love that.
So that's it.
Thank you so much, Marina.
Thank you for having me.
Great.
This was so good. Great. You've elevated our conversation
in a way that I don't know that we're going to be able to.
I know. I'm really.
How do you feel about hitting the high water mark in episode 4?
I'm really kind of worried that people are going to tune in and be like, "Wow, they're so smart." And then the next episode, Twigg and I are going to talk about Raygun for like 35 minutes. So no, but thank you so much.
Yeah, this is
You're doing the work. Folks can also follow Marina at the convention. We'll be at the convention next week. Yeah. They're doing lots of incredible stuff.
Yeah. And we're on the socials,
Oh, yeah. Do it. Plug your social. What do you got?
It's the same.
Yeah.
Dem Redistrict, all on the line. We can tag them.
We will.
Yeah.
Great.
And Eric, follow Eric. Eric loves the socials.
Great.
Eric's trying to get on TikTok.
It's a noted Bayesian. My family's from Barbados, and we love Eric Holder.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
He's real national. We have a lot of national pride.
It's you.
Yeah.
Eric Holder, Rihanna.
I was just going to say the triumvirate.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
There we go.
I'll have to send you. He was recently he did a YouTube interview with someone who's Jamaican, and they had a bit of a battle. It was quite cute.
Yeah,
it was quite cute. I mean, he was like, "That's cute, but we're better."
Wow.
Depends, not at cooking or dancing or making music. But we're much better about being diplomatic, playing along with others.
I think she was kind because she was like, she was like, we have Bob Marley. Like what?
No.
He's like Rihanna. It's like, okay,
sure,
toe to toe.
Sure, it's. Yeah,
it's a good battle.
It starts to fall apart on the cool factor, but we're really, really good at being stable and diplomatic.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Marina.
Thank you.
Do you want to do our housekeeping and socials?
Oh, you should do it.
No, I don't know it. I'll do it next time.
Twigg Jenkins.
Oh, Marina could do
it.
Yeah.
You want to do it? We are on. Here's the thing. Look, here's the thing. Yeah. This is exciting.
This is what we use your enthusiasm for.
I know. This is where the enthusiasm comes in. We are now officially on Spotify, which is a new thing for Spotify. They now have video podcasts on Spotify, so you can watch it while you're driving. So you should do that.
Brad.
Number 2, we're on YouTube. All of our episodes, full episodes, are on YouTube. Our little shitty little Zoom videos are still up on Instagram at Twigg and Jenkins. Is it Twigg Jenkins?
Twigg Jenkins.
Twigg Jenkins at Instagram.
I couldn't do the ampersand, and then it wouldn't let me write out the and.
It wouldn't let you write out the and. Interesting.
And then already had it.
Maybe someone else had it.
Yeah,
maybe there's another Twigg and Jenkins
out
here.
Happening?
So awkward.
You guys have some alternate.
We have doppelgangers.
Yeah.
But yeah, follow us on all the things.
Rad.
It's gonna be a ride.
Can't wait. Thanks.